acceptance, connection, transcendence. Welcome to the Seeker's Quest podcast with your host, Veda, Chaitanya Charan, and Radha Priti. Welcome to the Seeker's Quest. Good morning. I'm here with Chaitanya Charan. We call him CC, and Veda, two of my most inspirational teachers in my life, I think. So I'm honored to be here with you both. How are you guys?
Oh, if you say, I think as a qualification at the end of it, then I think you think too much.
What?
No, you say that two of my most inspirational teachers, and then you pause and you say, I think.
Oh.
We can certainly do this, I think. Anyway, yeah, I'm doing well, Veda. How are you?
A-okay.
Okay.
Great. Well, today we don't have so much time because we're pre-recording this and Cece has to get on a flight here in about 35 minutes. So it's going to be a little bit of a shortened episode, but we thought that we would pick up where we left off on the last episode. On the last episode, we were talking about making decisions, not letting your emotions inform you. No, letting your emotions inform you, but not deform you. So not making decisions based off your emotions. And where that conversation led was a conversation around functional and foundational identity. So our functional identities being what we identify with in our daily lives, like our roles as maybe a mother or employee or a son. And then our foundational identity being our identity in the recognition that we're a spirit soul. And we were talking about how we make decisions and how we really function and behave in both of these kind of identities, and our functional identity versus our foundational identity, when we can just function and behave in that functional identity, and when our foundational identity influences us, and how the two are related and connected and impact us in like a real way as we go through our daily lives. So we thought that we would pick back up with that conversation and elaborate on it a little bit today in the little amount of time that we have. So with that, Cece, do you want to bring us back into that discussion in your so eloquent ways that you do?
Thank you for that nice background of the topic today. I would like to start with like a medical metaphor for this, going to at a functional level. So suppose somebody has cold or somebody has fever. Now, there are times when you just wait it out or just take a simple pill and it goes away. But there are times when it indicates some deeper issues. That why does you have a fever? Why do you have cold? So now that it is basically a judgment call that has to be made. When should we just look at it at a functional level? Just take a pill, you'll get okay. Or no, do this test, explore this, explore that. And that requires some experience, some training. So similarly, when we face problems in life, at that time, how do we deal with the problems? Say, for example, in a relationship, somebody speaks harshly to us. And then, so if there is a harsh speech, when is it simply a result of just the heat of the moment? Everybody has, when the best of people are sometimes caught in we catch them at a bad time, or is it indicative of a serious fissure in the relationship? It's like there's going to quake that is happening, and we're getting some tremors. It's indicative of that. It's again a judgment call. Or so, do we address it at the functional level, or do we try to go dig deeper and look at a more fundamental level?
This is almost like we talk about being tolerant all the time, but if we're like sometimes over tolerant in a relationship dynamic that we are in all the time, like with somebody that we interact with all the time, if we're over tolerant, then the relationship could become very dysfunctional in a way that starts to bring our consciousness down. So it's kind of like when you say making the judgment call, it's kind of like deciding how we want to address certain behaviors or certain obstacles or conflicts in a relationship, that in a way that brings our consciousness up. And if it's somebody that we interact with a lot, then it could be something that we need to address in a real way, and not just always being tolerant.
Yeah.
I was thinking, see, you said you have to make a judgment call, right?
Yeah.
I was thinking there should be a space before you make a judgment call. It's so.
So you are making a judgment about my judgment call.
Yes.
Okay.
This judgment call, a lot of the times when we have something going on in our lives, in our relationships, to make a judgment call without actually pausing to have a dialogue, and then make a judgment call, sure. Because I think if we pause and have a dialogue, then you may not even need to make a judgment call. There will be no need for judgment, because judgment, I still think, causes a lot of dysfunctions in relationships. So that's what I was thinking when you're putting how it could be something very deep, or it could be something very heat of the moment. But if there's a space that we can give ourselves to pause and do some self-inquiry, or dive a little bit deeper into what just happened and inquire further, then I don't think it goes any further than that. And we'll know how to better address it. That's what I was.
I think you just put off by the word judgment, or you're triggered by the word judgment. I think you are too judgmental about the word judgment.
I think Veda feels judged.
That is definitely the word judgment definitely has a very dictatorial, top down.
Well,
emotion involved.
Maybe you could just use the word discernment, because when you said pause before the judgment call, I would say the pause is itself a judgment call. That, okay, I'm going to pause right now. So I'm using the word judgment not in a judgmental sense. I'm just saying that it requires evaluation. Okay, I need some evaluation to decide whether I need to go deeper. I need not go deeper. Evaluation, analysis, discernment. A pause. The way I was using it, pause and judgment call are the same thing. But I agree that the word judgment call judgment itself has a possibly negative connotation. We could use discernment. Yes, I agree that pause is very helpful overall for us to be able to deal with issues. So to move forwards, I was thinking that when we deal with these issues, there is dealing with them at a functional level. So, for example, if I'm feeling unhappy, now it could be I'm unhappy because just something went wrong. I had planned something, I didn't work out. say Veda, you're on a retreat and then somehow you miss a flight. You're agitated, you're disturbed, you're unhappy. Maybe you won't be unhappy, but others will be unhappy that you missed the flight. You are self-satisfied. But something went wrong. So now, do I need to just some that is life itself meaningless? Does life have any meaning? Do I need to ask that question? Well, sometimes it's required to ask this question. If you see in the start of the Bhagavad-gita, Arjun goes to this foundational question. He's caught with the functional dilemma. Should I fight or should I not fight? So from the functional level, the Gita does go down to the foundational level, where it focuses on should I fight is the functional question. But what is the right thing to do? The way I understand that question is, what is the right thing to do means what makes life meaningful, or what will make life meaningful when life otherwise seems meaningless. When everything seems meaningless, what will bring meaning to life? So that's Arjuna's question. And there he does go down to a fundamental level. So in one sense, it requires Arjun pauses. He's about to fight. Says, no, I can't fight. So that way we need to go down to foundation level at times. But just I'll conclude with this.
You know what I really like about Arjuna on the battlefield, CC?
Yeah.
The fact that he asks Krishna to take his chariot in between both the armies so he could see. So that observation is such a big part of what I feel is one of the big lessons when he's asking Krishna, please, my dear friend, take my chariot so I may see. I want to assess the situation. And then he pauses. That's one of my takes on, when I study the Gita, the importance to observe before you can pause and then really address the core issues by having a teacher to guide you through the process.
Yeah, I agree. He's ready to act. He observed, then he paused, and then you could say learn.
Right.
And then at the end again, we are ready to act, but with a higher consciousness.
Right.
So yeah, you just gave me an idea for a whole class.
Well, good. Something I've done right today.
You do everything right, but sometimes we get the right to understand how you are right.
Sometimes I get ready to act, but I don't observe, I just pause and that's it. It doesn't go any further.
Okay, that's possible. So that's why I was talking about this diagram. I'm thinking there can be too much. On one side, some have problem with overthinking. And there can be too impulsive. So you're too much, you become paralyzed. And then if it's too little, then we become reckless. So we can be reckless and moving too fast, or we can be motionless. So I would say in between is the balanced state where we think. So enough to learn and act wisely. So that is where when does something have to be dealt with? It's just a functional level. Okay, that's fine. These things happen in life. And sometimes when we are trying to act, we may end up very well not recognizing that life is this combination of two things. Sometimes we think, okay, you want me to stop?
Are you moving on from I'm kind of trying to figure out how that thinking pendulum related to the functional and foundational identities.
Okay. Yeah, I'm coming to that. Sometimes we think our way to actions, and sometimes we act our way to thoughts. That means that sometimes we have to think seriously. So the thinking our way to actions is more going at a foundational level. Okay, I have to really analyze what's going on over here. But sometimes we act our way to thoughts is more like a functional level. It's more like a trial and error method. Yeah, let's see what works over here. So if I have to ride a bike, then I try once, maybe I fall, I try again, I fall, and I act my way, and then I get a sense, okay, I have to hold the hand like this, I have to make sure that my weight doesn't go like that. So I get that understanding by acting. That's more like a functional way of doing things. But sometimes if I'm just repeatedly falling again and again and again, and it may not be that this more trying is going to help me. Maybe I have to just take a pause, look at it. Maybe if I'm trying to develop relationship and each time it's not working, and then maybe once I can say it was just it was a bad match. Second time it was, we don't really go well together. Third time, fourth time, but it's happening a dozen times. Then maybe I have to go back, and it's not just necessarily something wrong with the people I'm meeting. Maybe there's something which I need to work on myself. So I would say this, thinking our way to actions is where we are addressing things at a more foundational level. Okay. So I'm not sure whether.
So when we were talking about the difference between functional and foundational identities, and functional identities being more.
I was not talking. I mean, okay, we didn't really go into identity so much as looking for solutions at various levels. Do we need to go do we need to look for solutions at a deeper level? Or like we started with the medical metaphor. So
sure.
So at least the way I was approaching this topic, the way we were discussing the previous podcast was, when do we address a problem at a functional level and when do we address it at a fundamental level? And then corresponding to that, we may have to look at our functional fundamental identities.
Okay. Okay.
So we can relate with the identities also. Say, for example, if I'm trying to learn music and I just don't have a musical sense. Okay, that's a functional feature. Maybe that's functional flaw, not a feature. So maybe I have to train myself more. At the functional level itself, but maybe I try and it's not working. It's not working. Then maybe I go back and maybe in my childhood somebody had scarred me and they said, you are a lousy musician, and that script is playing inside me. And because of which, even if I have the musical sense, I'm just not able to act properly. So sometimes practicing alone will improve. Sometimes practicing may not. I have to address something deeper. So in that sense, we may have to go deeper at times. And ultimately, what the Gita says is go deeper to the level of our functional identity, our fundamental identity.
What do you think of this, Veda?
If you go on the pendulums, CC, I really liked something interesting right there. He says, thinking too much, it makes you paralyzed and motionless. And if you think too little, it can also paralyze you and make you motionless because you're finished, you're reckless, and you become paralyzed, like literally paralyzed and motionless. So either way, overthinking and too little thinking leads you to a similar conclusion. Is what I was thinking.
Yeah, I mean, in both cases, one becomes ineffective.
Correct.
So you could say that, there are generally, there are three responses. There's flight or fight. So these are both often quite impulsive. On the other hand, there is also freeze. So flight or fight are both involving too little thinking. I had to run away from here, or I had to hit back at this. Freeze. Oh, I just don't know what to do. I can't do anything. I'm helpless. But you could say in between you can have focus. Okay, what exactly is the issue? What can I do to deal with this issue right now? So that's one way to look at it.
Yeah, this one's something I relate to a little bit more.
Yeah. So now, if we look at our own lives, we have many desires, and then beneath that we have needs. And then even our needs, they have hierarchy. We have like surface needs, and then we have deeper needs. So most of our consciousness, we consider our consciousness as our energy, it's quite often consumed by, our consciousness gets consumed in our desires. It's like a person, we need food to eat, but then the desires are too strong. We eat food more than what is our body needs food to eat, but when we eat food, we may eat more food than what the body needs. And the desire not only goes beyond the need, but the desire can go against the need. And when this is happening repeatedly, when this happens, then there is a need to explore. So if I just go to some event, some ceremony where there's a big feast, and I eat a lot, okay, it's not the best thing to do, but one off time is okay. But if it's happening repeatedly, then we need to go deeper, and that's one of the key things I felt. I'll talk about three things. If repetition is happening, now then that is the pointer to go deeper. If something is an occasional thing, like starting with a fever, I just get a fever once and I take a pill or just wait it out, it goes away. But if I'm getting fever every few days, then something is wrong. So if something is happening repeatedly, the person speaks harshly to us every time. I mean, not every time, every few days they're speaking harshly. Then, okay, can it all be attributed to heat of the moment? Does that mean they're always going to be hot at all? So many moments. The repetition it's a pointer to go deeper. That's one of the key factors. So we need to go from a functional level to a fundamental level at that time.
If you go up on the screen, right here, I feel like this you're looking at the energy of consciousness. Desires are navigating the different functional conscious realities. But these desires, as you were saying, if we don't observe the repetition of it, then those desires become even more toxic, where it turns into some major cravings.
Yes,
and it becomes even more toxic, so that's why it's a good point that you bring up this repetition, that you need to go, it's a pointer, it's an indicator to go into something deeper. Otherwise it becomes even more toxic. So that's something that I was thinking when you were writing this, that the indicators have to be taken into account and not overlooked.
Yeah. Yes, I agree. So, repetition, it can lead to perpetuation, it can lead to aggravation, it can lead to even to destruction eventually. Like this person becomes, as you said, craving, it can lead to addictions. Addiction can be destructive. But if there is repetition and there's observation of the pattern in the repetition, then at least there's caution. And from that caution, you can have some level of awareness. Okay, what's happening over here? Okay, when do I relapse? When do I succumb? And then we can come up with some kind of protection for ourselves. That okay, this is what I need to do to prevent this from happening. So that what you earlier talked about observation. So observation is in one sense required. Many times if we don't spend too much time on ourselves, not ourselves in an egoistic sense, but at least some time for observing ourselves. I had a funny experience this time. I was traveling with one devotee, and he told me, I was giving a class, and I often say that in my pre-devotional days, I used to have anger issues. I had a lot of anger issues. So he said, that was interesting. I said, why was that interesting? He said, because you use the past tense. So what do you mean? He said, it's not that you had anger issues, you have anger issues. Really? I was taken aback. So then I said, when did you think that I was angry? So then he gave me a list of incidents, this time, this time, this time. I said, I was not at all angry at that time. At that time, I was just annoyed. I was just displeased. I was just disturbed. Maybe I was not angry. He said, I don't know all these differences. You seemed angry to me, which is interesting. So I told him, if I'm angry, you will really know that I'm angry. But those were like, I have a short temper. If at all I have it, it's a short temper. It lasts for a very short time, maybe just a moment or two. Maybe one sentence I'll speak in an annoyed way, and I'll just move on. But for the other person, that stays in their mind. And then if he had not told that to me, I would not have realized it. And so when he mentioned it, hey, I didn't really think, in 3 days, 4 or 5 times it happened. Just a minor annoyance, but I didn't express it. So I think sometimes for observing this repetition, it's helpful to have some association, not just friendly association. Okay, say a friendly association that's in sometimes in psychology, there's this idea of friendly fire. Where there is bullets being fired. When the bullet is being hitting us, whether it's coming from a friend or enemy, it's still going to hurt us. But friendly fire means that sometimes we need friends who hold us to the fire, who show us the mirror. So I think that's helpful.
Go ahead.
No, so that's one of the points. I felt repetition is something which when we have awareness, when we have association, when we can do observation, then we realize the repetition.
Instead of repetition, can we say reoccurrence? Because something that happens again and again,
And what is the exact difference you're sensing between repetition and reoccurrence?
Repetition seems like when we repeat something with, verbal. Reoccurrence is an event, in my understanding.
Yeah, okay.
Maybe I could be completely wrong. But Radha, what do you think about the concept?
Okay, yeah, please.
I'm kind of trying to assimilate today's, I guess. It's almost like you're saying that we get into a mode where we're just acting and we're not putting a lot of thought into how we're acting or what's going on around us. And in that, we can kind of get carried away by the waves of material life or certain relationship dynamics. And it takes kind of stopping and assessing, pausing, not judging to kind of figure out where we actually are and where we actually want to go. Is that kind of a summary of what you're saying today?
Yeah, agreed. It's more that our topic was, when do we address the issue at a functional level? When do we want to go down to fundamental level? So if at a functional level, something is happening repeatedly, is recurring, to use Veda's word. So is recurring, then that is a sure indicator that I do need to go deeper.
I do need to go deeper.
I need to dig deeper to find out what's happening over here.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
yeah.
So now, if I just go forward from here we will see that repetition was one thing, but repetition alone will not help us to, how do I go deeper? I recognize that I need to go deeper, but how do I actually go deeper? I need some, if I have to dig deeper at a particular place, I may need some tools to dig deeper. If I start trying to dig it with my hands and my fingernails, that's not going to be very easy or effective. So digging, it needs tools. So similarly, when we want to go deeper from the functional to the fundamental level, then it's important for us to also have some level of education. And this is where, if you look at the philosophy of the Bhagavad-gita, it is Krishna turned, Arjuna turned to Krishna. Okay, what am I to do? What really matters? What counts? So this is where we need a bigger worldview. So at a functional level, we are just having a view. Okay, this is like that. But at a fundamental level, we see that the view is not just coming from the situation. The view is coming from a worldview. So if my worldview, if I'm always having a bad relationship with people, maybe it's my worldview is that nobody can be trusted. People are bad people. The world is a terrible place. And that worldview is leading to my particular views like that. So if my worldview is that, is in a particular way, our worldview, in one shape, it says shapes our every view, while our worldview is shaping our every view while staying out of our view. So it's shaping and it's staying out. This is where we need education in general about worldviews and what is our worldview. So the Gita offers us a worldview. In one sense, the Gita aligns Arjuna's worldview with reality. When that happens, he is able to function better in life.
So even if we're operating like at the functional level, and we get to a point where we realize or we recognize that we're kind of on a hamster wheel in certain, again, dynamics or behavioral patterns, if we don't have the proper worldview to put it into context and really understand it on a deeper level, then we're still going to be operating on a functional level. We may pause and assess, but if during that, if that assessment doesn't cause us to seek deeper knowledge or wisdom or a different worldview, then we're likely just going to get right back on the same hamster wheel. Like Arjuna would have if Krishna didn't come and consult him when he went to the middle and he saw and he was so grief-stricken. if he didn't have Krishna come in and give him a deeper worldview, he would have only been able to operate with the tools that he had at that current time, which were good, which was a pretty solid set of tools, but it wasn't the deepest of worldviews.
Definitely. It's a nice way of looking at it. So Arjuna certainly had the tools to fight the war, but he didn't have the tools at that time to decide whether I should fight or not. So generally, in one sense, you can say everybody is seeking something. But if somebody is a seeker at a superficial level, oh, I'm seeking which clothes to buy next, which fashion is the latest, and I want to get that. That's very superficial. But generally, when we use the word seeker, we are using it for something much deeper. So this is something more like a shopper than a seeker. They're just going around shopping things. So that is, education is important. And then once we have that education, now then there is that after, okay, I get this worldview. After I understand this is how I need to function, then there has to be a conscious effort. It's that the older worldview it's not just like a replaceable camera where I just remove one film and I put another film. We will tend to go back towards our older worldview. So it's important that we need to, in one sense, be able to, it requires some level of purification, a cleansing of our inner being. So the change of worldview is not just an intellectual thing. It's at a deeper level, it's a spiritual thing. I may say, oh, I believe God exists. I believe that everything happens is ultimately for good. But if I'm extremely attached to certain things, then when something goes away, I just can't accept it. It's like a child. The child wants a toy. And if the toy goes away or the toy breaks and the parents are not ready to give a new toy, then the child is, my parents don't allow me at all. The parents may be doing a dozen other things out because of their love for the child. But the child is not going to see that. So there are so many necessities and facilities that the child is being provided by the parents. But there's no toy, the child will see there's no love. So like that, for us, often we are like children in the sense that we are craving and slaving for trivial things. So if our worldview has changed, then not only we see a bigger picture, but we also seek deeper things. And then purification in one sense means that our desires get directed toward deeper things. So somebody who's impure, they're just looking for the next dopamine hit, whether it's through a drink or whether it's through watching a movie or whatever. That is, in one sense, purification. So these 3 steps are what, once we decide that I have to go from a functional, address a problem not a functional level or a deeper level, then we have these steps involved to do that.
So it's not just recognizing that where you are is not where you want to be because you've been there many times and realize you don't want to be there. It's recognizing that what got you there is also not really conducive to your highest self. And then once recognizing that what got you there isn't conducive, it's seeking something else, not just through education, but through purification, which is directing our desires to things that are more congruent with our true selves.
Yes, true.
I look at
Veda, yeah, please.
Go ahead.
I need to go ahead and leave in a few minutes. Do you want to add a few points before I summarize, or otherwise?
Sure.
I could summarize and you can carry on. You can continue the discussion for some time also,
I have one thought and then you can summarize it. The other thought, when you said worldview, I feel like we should elaborate on the worldview itself, because worldview is not sufficient. Because depends on whose worldview are we looking at the world from. because everyone has a different view of the world and their worldview. So that association or having a teacher is very critical who are looking at the world with a higher consciousness. You addressed it somewhat when you mentioned the purification, but purification of the lens that we look at the world with is very critical, because I feel everybody has a worldview. And if I hear your worldview and I judge my life based on your worldview, then I could still be getting the raw end of the deal, So, yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I did
So
say that,
the
we have
lens
to.
has to be a spiritual lens.
Yes.
Therefore, we need a teacher. So that's the only
Yeah.
point I want to make, but go for it. You can summarize it.
Thank you.
I like that point.
Yeah. Actually, maybe you can continue on the discussion for 15, 20 minutes if you want to. You may have to leave, I may have to leave, but you can continue on if you want to. I can summarize otherwise. So we were thinking of
Yeah, let's
discussing this.
summarize it. Let's summarize it.
Then you can continue after that if you want. Then you can have a summaryless continuation. So we said that we need some amount of pause. I can see whether your eyes judging me, whether you're going to use the word judgment now. So pause that can help us to decide that when we have to handle a situation, some problem is there. Do I handle it at the functional level, or do I go down to a fundamental level to handle it? If I have cough or fever, when do I need to go deeper? That was first thing we discussed, and then we discussed that when we are trying to address things at a fundamental level, we have to so we talked about thinking. When we are thinking, it can be too much or it can be too little, and both lead to problems. So when we are thinking too little, that means we are addressing everything at just a functional level, and maybe that's not enough. And it's too much, then we are trying to take everything down to a fundamental level, and maybe that's also not necessary. That's where we talk about the pause or the discernment. And then once we decided that, okay, how do we know when to go down from functional to fundamental level? If there is repetition or recurrence of something. So then we talked about if something is happening again and again, then maybe there's something deeper to be dug over here. And then for that, we need education, where we try to see what is my worldview and whether my worldview is aligned with spiritual wisdom. And then lastly, talk about purification. It's not just alignment, it's not just an intellectual alignment, intellectual agreement. It's more like a spiritual harmonization, where purification essentially means what we value becomes equal to what is of value. Our desires are not for superficial things, but they are for deeper things. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Please have a safe trip to Australia and conquer the world and give the world.
You have already conquered the world. I'm trying to follow in your footsteps now. Hare Krishna.
Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Krishna.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.